Hello and welcome back to more of Math 120. So we're going to be jumping into 7.3, ratio, proportion, and variation. So now ratios are a fancy way of just comparing two things. But we compare two things when we're looking at, let's say, fractions. So we're actually going to be stealing a lot of ideas and concepts from fractions as we go. So let's see what we're dealing with here. So generally a ratio is written as a quotient of the two quantities. So again, we're comparing two numbers or quantities, so we're going to be writing them as a quotient. So typically we do have a few different ways to do that. So a ratio is a quotient of two quantities. The ratio of the number A to the number B is written A to B, so we can write it in words, which is kind of boring. We can write it as the fraction, so ding, 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 A over B. Or this third option is something you'll see in other specific professions. So sometimes in nursing, they like to use the colon to compare those two quantities. So, but I mean, fractions really are probably the best way mathematically to view them. So, okay, write each as a ratio, so the ratio of 40 miles to 30 miles. So the one thing we notice is that the quantities are both talking about miles. So that's good. So in this case, first number goes on top, and don't forget the units, and the bottom will be the second number. Now what's nice about the units being the same is that they cancel out. So all you're left with is 40 over 30, but we can reduce that down to 4 over 3. Now, some of you might say, well, should we go further? Should we write that as a mixed number? And the answer is no. Because we're specifically talking about ratios, we want a comparison of two numbers. So 4 to 3 is the ratio. Even though it's improper and it looks weird, it's okay for ratios. So what about the second one, though? The ratio of 20 yards to 8 feet. Well, now we're talking about two different size units. So we really can't compare them yet until we get them with the same units. So now your question is do I want to change the yards into feet, or do I change the feet into yards? Does it make a difference? Well, I would say yes. So what's the rule of thumb? Look at the size of the unit. So hopefully you have an idea of how big those units are. So, I mean, a yard, well, if you're not sure, a yard is pretty long. About 3 feet long. And then a foot, is 12 inches. It's about this long here. So the yard is bigger than the foot. Okay, so that much you want to try to keep in your head. Once you determine which one's the larger unit, that's the one you want to change into the smaller one. So we don't want to change feet into yards because then you're making the units bigger. We like to make the units smaller. So how do we do that? Well, you have to know how those two units are related. So if you don't know off the top of your head, that's okay. A lot of these conversions will be given to you. So in this case, 1 yard is equal to 3 feet. So that's something that you should try to commit to memory. It's one of many conversions that you should kind of know in the back of your mind. But like I said, if you don't, it's not the end of the world. You'll still be okay. So once we know that 1 yard is 3 feet, we can just quickly multiply this by 3, and that changes it to 60 feet. So now you're not dealing with yards anymore. So now when we write our ratio, we can put the 60 feet on top and the 8 feet on the bottom, and the feet can now cancel out, which we like. And so then we can reduce this down. I think 4 might go into both of those. So 15 over 2. And there's your ratio in lowest terms. So again, they behave like fractions. We do want them in lowest terms when possible. Now, another way we can tackle these types of problems is to kind of show the math a little bit more embedded into the process. And what that looks like and how you can describe this a little bit is by using conversion factors. So we had to use a conversion factor to change the yards into feet. But again, what's the process and how does it look mathematically? I mean, we kind of just said times it by 3, but what does it really look like? So here's what it looks like. So in general, conversion factors can be used to adjust ratios or rates when other units are required. Conversion factors can be used in one of two ways. Now, if we wanted to change feet into inches, well, again, so feet and inches, we got to relate those two things in our mind. So we hopefully know that 1 foot equals 12 inches. But now mathematically, we can use that two different ways. One way would be to put the 1 foot on top and the 12 inches on the bottom. And that works to our benefit with this first problem because we're starting with inches. Because we're starting with inches, we can cross cancel those inches out, and the only units left are the feet, which is what we want. So now all we got to do is take care of the math. So divide 42 divided by 12, and you get 3.5, so 3.5 feet. Alternatively, we might want to use the conversion factor the other way, which puts the 12 inches on top and the 1 foot on the bottom. So, and that's to our benefit for this type of problem that says how many inches is 2.75 feet. So we're starting with that. We can put it over 1 like we did the other one. But now, because the feet are in the top, we want the feet in the bottom. So that's why we had to reverse the conversion factor around. So now those feet cancel out. All you have left is inches. So we're just multiplying those two numbers to get 33 inches. So we're always going to be able to do that with a conversion factor. We can use it one of two ways. So we just have to be careful and make sure those units cross cancel, and then we're fine. So we got a series of problems we're going to take a look at here. We're given a bunch of conversion factors. 32 ounces is 1 quart. Again, you don't have to memorize these, but some of them you might kind of remember in the back of your mind, which is good. 1,000 megabytes, or MB for short, is 1 gigabyte, or GB for short. We got 1 kilogram is 2.2 pounds. Some of you might know that. 1 mile is 5,280 feet. Okay. So now the first question, you have 3 quarts of milk. How many ounces do you have? So if we want to use this style of canceling your units out, the first thing we should do is start with what we're given. So we have 3 quarts, and let's put it over 1. So now we know we're going to have to use this first conversion factor, but now how do we write it? How do we write it so that way we can get those units to cross cancel? So where does the 32 ounces go? Where does the 1 quart go? Hopefully you would write it like this. So we got to have the quart in the bottom because we need it to cross cancel. And now, oops, I made a boo-boo. Not quarts on top, but ounces on top, silly me. All right, so now we got our ounces on top, which is what we want. So now when we multiply straight across, we're going to get 96 ounces. And that's it. So again, you got a 50-50 shot, but if you don't write your units down, then you're going to potentially make mistakes. So it's always good to write those units in there. Let's try one more. So we got 200 pounds, LB for short. What is his weight approximately in kilograms? So now we got to use this second conversion factor, 1 kilogram and 2.2 pounds. So what goes where? What goes on top? What goes on the bottom? So the 1 kilogram has to go on the top. 2.2 pounds is going to have to go on the bottom. A common mistake is people think, oh, I always got to multiply the numbers together. Not necessarily. Sometimes you got to divide them. So, and that's what's going to happen here. So the pounds cancel. So we got to divide 200 divided by 2.2. And let's see what that gives us. We got 200 divided by 2.2. 90.9. So we can round that. And then don't forget your units. So 90.9 kilograms. All right. Let's see what we got on the next page. All right, so we got your computer backup storage holds 4 gigabytes. How many megabytes is this? Now, if you are pretty proficient with the metric system, some of these are going to be very quick for you. But if you're not, well, then you got to go back to the conversion factors. But the first thing we should start with is the 4 gigabytes. And we'll put it over 1. And so now how are gigabytes and megabytes related? That one's 1,000, remember. So let's see, so 1 gigabyte over 1,000 megabytes. Oh no, we got to reverse it. So yeah, just make sure those units line up. So we got 1,000 megabytes on top and 1 gigabyte on the bottom. So now our units cancel. So this is going to give us 4,000. Nice and quick. Okay, let's try this one. How many cups are in 5 quarts? So we got 2 cups is 1 pint, and then 2 pints is 1 quart. Well, let's start with what we're given. We're given 5 quarts, so that's your starting point. Let's put it over 1. But now, which conversion factor do we start with? Well, the only thing we could start with is something that has to have quarts in it. So that means we're going to have to use the second one first. So how do we write that conversion factor properly? What's on top and what's on the bottom? Hopefully you were screaming at me. 1 quart on the bottom, silly. And then the 2 pints are on the top, so that cancels those out. So now we're dealing with pints, which means we can use the second one to change it into cups. So 1 pint on the bottom, 2 cups on the top. Cross cancel those units. And now what are we left with? How many cups? Just multiply all 3 of them. 5 times 2 times 2, which is 20. So 20 cups. All right, now for a real tester of your ability. A skateboarder is moving at 3 feet per second. How many feet per minute is she moving? How fast is she going in miles per hour? Well, what are we starting with? It's always you got to know where you're starting. We're starting with 3 feet per second. Now, per is like a slash, but a slash is like a fraction. So we can write this as 3 feet over 1 second. That's the same thing as what we're started with. But what do they want? They want feet per minute. So they want the feet on the top and the minutes on the bottom. Well, we already have feet on the top, so that's good. But we got seconds on the bottom right now. We got to get rid of the seconds and change it into minutes. So what could we multiply that by to do that? Well, seconds and minutes. We know there's 60 seconds in a minute. So let's put the 60 seconds on the top because the units can cross cancel. And then we got the 1 minute on the bottom. So now we got feet on the top, which is what we want. And we got minutes on the bottom, which is what we want. So now we can just multiply the numbers. So it looks like we're going to get 180 feet per minute. All right. Well, we also want it in miles per hour. Well, since we already have it in feet per minute, minutes we can squeeze into hours. Feet, we can change that into miles because we have the conversion on the other page. So let's start with 180 feet over 1 minute. So if we want to get rid of the minutes, what would we multiply by? What over what? So we need minutes and hours in there. So 60 minutes is going to have to go on top, and 1 hour is going to have to go on the bottom. So that cancels those out. Now, if you wanted to, subtotal it at this point, you could, But we can just keep going with conversion factors and then do all the math at the end. So, okay, so we got hours on the bottom, which is what we need, but now we got to get the miles. So we got to get rid of this feet. So if feet is on the top here, we're going to have feet on the bottom here, which means we got the miles up here. And 1 mile is 5,280 feet. So it looks like we're going to have to multiply these two numbers together, but then divide by this one. So let's see what that gives us. 180 times 60 equals that, divided by 5280 equals 2.04554545. So this looks like 2.0, I'm going to round it to 5 miles per hour. So not terrible, but it definitely can be tricky. If you don't have that conversion factor aligned right, stuff's just not going to cancel out right. So you've got to make sure you write those units in. So, all right, we'll stop here and then we can pick up the proportions in the next video. See you in a minute.